One of the major initiatives over the last 10 years on homelessness was Cash Not Care, and whatever your viewpoints on it, it has housed many of our homeless individuals. If you are in GA, you get either a bed or, in many cases, an SRO room. What I think we haven't done is really go to the next level, which is we need to start helping people with job training and creating actual jobs in their neighborhood and doing a lot of training programs. We find that actually 6-month, 3-month training programs don't work. You need year-long programs that continue to train them while they're on the job, not just let them go as soon as they get a job. So I'd really like to see us investing more in that arena, not just focus on housing, which is something that we've been doing thus far. I think that we need to do things that are more innovative, so not just shelters, but 24-hour sobriety centers, where people can go at any point during the day, where we train staff, not necessarily doctors and nurses, but we actually train staff on how to deal with inebriated individuals. So I think there are a couple of different things that we can do in terms of dealing with homelessness that we haven't done yet. But you know, we have made a first step, and we just need to keep moving on with addressing homelessness.
Care Not Cash is a modest success, but it was successful only because they harvested or appropriated units of housing that had been targeted for other populations. For several years, we had no more family housing, and we had no more senior housing, and we had no more housing for veterans, because it was all reallocated to take care of Care Not Cash. Now, that's not a bad thing. I certainly know many individuals who 6 years ago were homeless who now have a small apartment. That's a good thing. But the number of homeless on the streets has basically remained about the same. Not a real success. Section 8 housing is, if you read today's Examiner, Section 8 housing is a disaster. Our housing authority is on HUD's troubled list, and the mayor is in charge of that, and he has failed us.
What would you do to change it?
Regarding Section 8 housing?
Any of it.
Well,
homelessness generally.
The mayor's the boss. He should take some responsibility for it. The director of the housing authority throws up his hands and says the whole inspection system is not working. Well, who do they report to? They report to you. And who do you report to? You report to the mayor. We need more accountability.
Do you think the board has any role in setting the policy or fine-tuning it?
Only in the budget process, and with 90% of the budget process tied up with set-asides and so on, it's pretty difficult. No, we have a strong mayor system of government, and that's where the responsibility lies. And one last thing, if I could mention it, is the shelter bed system is a disaster, and we've got to move away from putting people into these kinds of shelters and moving them into supportive housing and moving them into decent homes.
When Care Not Cash was passed, we had about 2,900 homeless on the street. Now we have about 2,900 homeless on the street, and we're housing 5,900. So, and what we're doing was putting them into units that the city pays for. And the cost of our homeless programs is approaching $1 billion in the city. Wow. And we need to focus more on what happens once they're in the housing. Right now, in some cases, some of the housing, it's all voluntary services. We have wraparound services, it's voluntary, and some of these buildings that we fund and we build are becoming crack houses. You know, until we get some of these people diagnosed and off and assisted with either their substance abuse or their schizophrenia or one of their 2 or 3 or 4 diagnosed conditions, they'll never be able to get a job. So we need to focus on services. The services have to be mandatory as a condition of housing, so that we can't we can't continue to warehouse these people year after year after year after year, or we're going to end up warehousing every homeless person in Northern California.
I think I mentioned this before, that we have year after year cut services. We now have waiting lines for people who want to get sober. We have closed down drop-in centers, so the folks who have no place to go when the shelters close only have the streets to sit and lie on. We are being faced, and there's chart after chart in this book about federal housing and public housing support, where the federal government has left local cities and urban areas to take on this task. So what we need to do is look at the successes that are part of there's a lot of programs that have been put out Care Not Cash is just one of them. We have created a community justice court to try and encourage some of these folks into programs. There's things about that that are working. We have Homeless Connect, which is now going to be putting a storefront in the Tenderloin where the services are actually needed. We need to actually bring these folks together and figure out what works in them and what doesn't, and cut the cost. Because again, $3 million a year for a separate court system could be saved if we actually reincorporate it into our existing court system. So there's a lot we can do with what we have.
You know, the idea is to rehabilitate the homeless from the abuses that society has heaped on them, that has oppressed them to the point where they are homeless. And that is basically the only way to really cure homelessness. I think that there should be more incentive to give to homeless organizations and such as CHP and Larkin Street, who have fantastic records. I think that when a landlord is abusing a tenant who is Section 8 or gets money from the state so that they can raise the rent, after 3 strikes, we should take back that property and give it to someone who is a proven good landlord to manage that building for the landlord. And I also think that we need to go after the Academy of Art, have them to actually create housing for their students and return the 47 rent-controlled buildings that they bought and 11 SROs back to the city so that we can house some of the people who have been displaced by over-gentrification and the quick gentrification. Also, we need to encourage people to get micro-loans to buy parts of the city so they can remain attached to their community.
Homelessness is a complicated problem. Some things the city does very well. The city provides a lot of services for people, which is very important. We cannot turn our back on our fellow San Franciscans just because they're homeless. At the same time, we have to recognize that the city spends an incredible amount of money, and it makes one wonder how efficient a lot of their solutions are. By best estimates, we spend somewhere between $150 and $200 million every year on homelessness. And as everyone who lives around here knows, the problem is not really getting any better. It's not really changing. And so we have to look at what we can do to actually end homelessness, as opposed to change and ameliorate the conditions of homelessness. Now, I think the first thing we can do is when we allow new low-income housing and SRO housing to come online, we should include services for the residents right there in the building, so that people who need a hand, who are struggling, who have perhaps substance abuse problems or mental health problems, they need the services right there so they can access them. And some of our housing has that and some does not, but that I think can make a big difference in the lives of the people who live there.
Well, I guess the only thing the city is doing right is making sure that those people who are, dealing with homelessness are getting paid. Otherwise, it's a bad job. I see that a lot of the nonprofits have continued to utilize, people living in SROs to go and advocate for, more money for their organizations. Yet they're not advocating to get these people into better housing. Why are you continuing to keep people warehoused when you should be moving them through? And then when you move them through and get them into better housing, get those people who are on the streets and put them into those SROs and to make sure that there are wraparound services there also. This is how we'll end homelessness. This is what we need to do. When you continue to build new buildings, move these people through this system. Don't continue to keep them warehoused. So, San Francisco gets maybe a D for homelessness for me.
Well, with homelessness, I approve of the idea of care not cash. But I'm kind of concerned what I heard on Sunday regarding we have 1,000 less beds than the Santa Cruz area in our shelters. I think that is going the shelter direction may be a more efficient, low-cost idea to helping with the homeless situation. And as we gain momentum, gain revenues, we can move homeless individuals into SROs and SRO individuals into apartments. I think currently the way it stands, there's an effort being made to help our homeless population. I would like to see, you know, a little bit of accountability and responsibility towards the individuals who are taking the housing and the funding that they're receiving. And as the next District 6 supervisor, if elected, I would like to start an accountability program for these individuals.